Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the final planning meeting. We've all had a nice wee bus tour this afternoon, so that should really refresh us for coming in here. So we'll start, and I have apologies for absence, please. Councillor Montague is here. She's not here, is she? Right.
Yeah, I can just cover the apologies then, Chair. It's Provost Mary Montague, Councillors Anderson, Devlin and Wallace.
Right, okay. Any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Okay with that. Let's move on to item 3. I don't really need to read it all out to you because we've all been there, we've all seen what's, and we've all got opinions, okay? So I'll open it up for, what's that guy's name again?
It's Mr. Burek.
Mr. Burek, sorry, this time I've been told you're going to speak. This is gentleman has a house in the actual oh, he can't hear. You're going to speak now?
Yes,
yes, please. And the full committee's here. Okay, so just go ahead now.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Stash Burek. My wife and I live at Rowden's Cottage on the Caldwell estate, and so we'll be most affected by any development there. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to address the meeting. The whole proposal hinges on the restoration of Caldwell House. It's a Category A listed building and apparently an important example of Robert Adams' work. But it doesn't feature in any of Adams' mainstream biographies or catalogues of his work. That's probably because it was never built to his original specifications. There are significant differences between the original design and what was actually built. So you see, the proposal is in effect to restore the house to something that it never actually was. The estate, as you know, is in Greenbelt zone, but council documents such as local development plan have recognised the need for, quote, limited development to support the restoration of the Caldwell House. We do appreciate the need to generate a restoration deficit, but the current proposal, I think, for some 170 dwellings plus a care home is not limited in its rural Greenbelt context. The proposed development is about half the size of Upler Moor. It's about a mile away, even further by road, and separated from the village itself by a main road, a railway line and a golf course. So essentially it's a totally new development, new settlement in violation of the principles of Greenbelt and the local development plan. It violates other council policies too. So for example, the policy on specialist residential and supported accommodation says that development should be, quote, located within the urban area. This is so that residents have access to facilities and don't become isolated. This sort of out of sight, out of mind thinking for residential accommodation disappeared some 40 odd years ago, which is exactly why the Health Service sold off Caldwell and many other similar residential facilities back in the 1980s. The local development plan stresses the importance of access to public transport, and the section on spatial objectives states that development should be located, quote, on sites which can be accessed sustainably to reduce the proportion of journeys made by private car. While there is no public transport within walking distance of the estate, a private bus service was originally part of the proposal, but now we hear that this is going to be up to the operator of the care home to decide on. In practice, this means that residents on the estate, visitors and workers will end up using private cars to come and go. The issues with some of the detail as well. So, for example, the policy expresses the need for residents to lead an independent lifestyle and socialise easily with other residents, quote unquote. This suggests some sort of community or social hub, and a cafe with 6 tables suggested by the developer is hardly enough for 170 odd dwellings. There's a whole host of other issues as well. and key elements seem to have been reduced to box-ticking exercises. Our fear is that it won't provide the retirement utopia that the developers have presented, and it could just turn into a neglected white elephant. The developers have dismissed concerns about the risks of the project, saying that these are private commercial decisions. But surely the whole point about planning, policy and regulation is to make sure development is appropriate and in the public interest, and not just for a developer's benefit. The need for development for this development has even been questioned by the Social Care Partnership. It's an expensive and risky project, and there seems to be no plan B should it fail. What will happen if the project gets into financial difficulties and the developer can't complete the restoration of Caldwell House? In similar situations, developers have asked for variations in the planning consent, with the implied threat of walking away from the project and leaving someone else to pick up the pieces. There are environmental burdens in all of this too. As we hear about increasing droughts, floods and so on, we should be acutely aware that major global impacts are a result of many small local effects. East Renfrewshire Council has adopted wide-ranging environmental policies and practices, but I'm saddened to see how readily some members might be prepared to disregard them. This proposal isn't about generating resources to restore Caldwell House, but rather the developers seem intent on using the house as a lever to allow them to circumvent a whole host of council and national policies. Don't get me wrong, we're not against development per se, and we can even see some benefits for us in this proposal. But I think it has just so many things wrong with it, and so we feel it's just a few steps too far. Thank you for listening.
Right, thank you very much. So you can pass it on now. Can we get somebody to answer some of the questions he has?
Chair,
You need to answer this. You need to answer the. Sorry, Mr. Souter. I'm going to give Mr. Souter 5 minutes to sum up for the whole project right on that has been put forward. Is that okay? So just give him 5 minutes just now. Right.
Thank you, Convener, for the opportunity to present to committee. Having visited the site today, you will have seen how Caldwell House and its estate has been neglected over many years. There is an urgent need for restoration. Attempts to find uses for these buildings in the past have not come to fruition. Today, councillors, you have a viable and deliverable proposal before you to determine. You have the opportunity to save Caldwell House for future generations. You have the opportunity to approve a proposal that will create jobs, substantially improve the local environment and properly manage the estate in perpetuity. Caldwell House is designated as a Category A listed building by Historic Environment Scotland. It is an early example of the castle-style design by the world-famous Scottish architect Robert Adam. It is a historic building worthy of conservation for the nation. It is council policy, policy D14, and I quote, to positively manage the historic built environment through engagement with landowners and other organisations to ensure that heritage assets are safeguarded, preserved and enhanced, have appropriate viable uses and have a sustainable future for the benefit of future generations. The reason for that policy in your local development plan is the Council's recognition that finding a viable use for Caldwell House is a public duty that carries with it long-term public benefits. Our investigations highlighted that Adam's design of the northern facade is of international cultural significance and not just national significance. Caldwell House, when restored, will be one of the most significant listed buildings in East Renfrewshire and one of the most significant in Scotland. Caldwell House cannot be saved without some level of enabling development. Various options to deliver the restoration of Caldwell House have been considered by the applicant. Through careful analysis, the limited scale of a retirement village has been chosen as the most sustainable option to restore Caldwell House. This option will raise the necessary funds with the least environmental impact. The retirement village comprises a mix of bungalows, assisted living flats, a 60-bed care home providing specialist support for those with dementia. The restored Caldwell House provides the community hub and will be the village focus. The challenges and the need to improve services for those living with dementia are matters which councillors are well aware of. The construction of Caldwell Village will be a major boost for the local economy. Up to 85 full and part-time jobs will be provided in the care home, with around 200 jobs provided during the construction process. At such a critical time for the Scottish economy, securing jobs in this rural area of East Renfrewshire should be supported. We are acutely aware of the environmental matters which you have been asked to take into account. Approving this proposal allows mature woodlands to be properly managed for the first time in decades. While it is inevitable that trees will be removed to accommodate the enabling development, most of these trees are non-native conifers with limited biodiversity value. Caldwell Developments is committed to a comprehensive woodland management scheme. Its replanting proposals will provide a greater number and more diversity of trees than currently on the site. Repairs to the heritage features in the grounds and the creation of a 5-kilometre path network for public use will be provided. The improved estate will be open and accessible to all. Sustainable development is promoted by the use of solar panels and air source heat pumps generating energy, and with installation provided in every home, reducing energy demand. Electric vehicle charging points will be provided for public and private use, and water-saving measures introduced into all homes. The future of Caldwell Estate is not that of dilapidated buildings set within an unmanaged woodland, as seen on today's site visit, but as a future resource for the whole community. There is a clear choice facing councillors today. It is a choice between creating a thriving new community with specialist care accommodation and a restored historic building at its heart, or allowing these historic buildings to remain at risk within an unmanaged estate. We ask you to support the recommendation in the report that Caldwell House should be saved. That is a positive choice, a choice that creates a thriving new community with a managed woodland and more biodiversity for flora and fauna. A choice that will secure jobs and investment for East Renfrewshire. A choice that saves Caldwell House for future generations and the nation. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Is there any, I'll open it up for any questions on the site visit? Andrew.
Thank you very much, Chair. It was noted on the site visit that there's quite an extensive access road from the main road to the site, and it says within the councillors' papers that the road service have raised a question over the level of adoption. So, Chair, I was wondering if we can have some clarity, please, as to what that level of adoption would be, because for those of us on the site visit, the developer's agent had suggested that the council would be adopting all of the roads, and I don't know if that's quite the case. My concern really is to get to the nub of it. We have some quite vulnerable people who will be residing within this development, and it's in a very rural location. So in the depths of winter, could we guarantee that we would have the road gritting service sufficient to ensure 24/7 access regardless of inclement weather? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. We actually have a condition number 2, proposed that relates to adoption. So, as we discussed at the site visit, there was some discussion during the course of the application about the level of adoption within the site. And as a result, we're seeking clarification on that, seeking clarification agreement on exactly what will be adopted. So that allows us to do that post-decision, if granted. In terms of the specific point about gritting, etc., clearly, if it's adopted by the council, then it's our responsibility. If it's not adopted, then there's a responsibility on the owners, the applicant, to implement that in the correct way to ensure safety. I hope that answers the question.
Can I add to that question? We know, as most of us here that have been councillors for a while know, that it quite often takes a good number of years for a property to be, for roads to be adopted, particularly in new developments. So the Paul Noon estate, for instance, has only been adopted this year, and it started being built about 8 years ago. And there's obviously a period, even once the adoption has been agreed, a further 12-month period. So with that, and the same with Maidenhill, they're not going to adopt the roads until the site is basically finished. Is that going to be the same here, in which case even promises or guarantees about adoption will not be imminent? It will be several years minimum ahead, so we could be talking, I presume, of the road being adopted once the whole site is completed, which could be, I don't know how long that could take. Could you clarify that? Because I know in normal housing estates it would be once the site is completed.
Thank you. It's a difficult question to answer precisely. Every site, as you've mentioned a couple there, does have to go through the adoption process. So, unfortunately, I can't answer the question exactly when it would be adopted. It really is dependent on information coming forward and being agreed with roads. So there clearly is a responsibility there on both parties, but yeah, unfortunately I can't answer exactly how long it would take.
Sorry. Can I just clarify that then? The chances are it's not, even if it is agreed, it's not going to be in the very near future. The chances are it will be a considerable, a reasonable number of years. And like Councillor Morrison has said, with these vulnerable people, and given that it does not comply with the policy that was talked about earlier about being near infrastructure and being so that residents don't become isolated, it sounds like this will be a very isolated area in terms of the residents and also in terms of access by ambulances and other medical, including care home staff, including district nurses, GPs. It sounds like it's going to remain an isolated area for quite some time.
Thank you, Chair. I can give a brief description of a road construction process. So all new development, if it's residential, over a certain level requires a road construction consent. So a house builder requires planning permission, usually building warrants for the houses, and also a road construction consent. Road construction consents can be done in sections. So, for example, take Maidenhill. The first part of Maidenhill to be adopted was from Old Day Road up to the first junction. So that's the first aspect. And then as the houses get constructed, the applicants, the house builders, then apply to the road service for a road construction consent, and then they build to that construction standard, and then the roads department inspects it and then adopts the road. So it's a sequence of events that happens, and it's the normal business of the road service to do that. I hope that's helpful.
But it will take, I mean, I believe Maidenhill was an exception because of certain pods and there was about 1,000 houses. So, like the likes of Paul Noon, for instance, that has taken 7 years or so from the first house to the adoption. So it doesn't sound like an exception is going to be made for this in terms of being similar to Maidenhill. It sounds like it will be in the normal process. And when you talked about once the council inspects it, I believe in that case there's still another 12 months. So you're talking a minimum of 12 months even after it has come up, been approved as being of sufficient standard. Isn't that correct?
The roads department go at the level that the developer develops. So yes, there could be gaps where they don't build, or there's gaps where they build, at a really good pace. So it's very difficult to say when the road would be adopted. Obviously, in this case, the entrance to the site would probably be the first part of the roads construction consent process. But other than that, I don't think I can really answer anything else. But there is a legislative process that a developer and the council go through to adopt the road. And I'm sorry if I haven't answered everything. It's just obviously, a wee bit deaf today. Thank you.
And Mr. Salter, would you like to come in here on that one?
That's a very good question. Just to clarify matters, as you will have seen on your site visit today, there is an existing road there. That road will be upgraded to adoptable standards. The plan is that the new roundabout into the site and the upgrade of effectively the loop road up to Caldwell House and back out will be done in phase 1. So the main loop road for the entire estate and the future development of Caldwell Village will be done in phase 1. It's my understanding and working elsewhere that once you've got road construction consent and once you've completed the development of your adoptable road, which will be this loop road and the roundabout, then it would be subject to a maintenance period of 12 months and adopted thereafter. So in terms of programme, and at that stage, at the end of phase 2, which is essentially that period, 80 bungalows of people aged over 55, no assisted living flats would be built and no care home would be built. So in terms of the residents on the site, they will be able-bodied, and in terms of adoptability, then it would be up to that standard. So everything would be done in a 2-year period.
So I'm trying to get a clearer answer than I got from you, and in reaction to Councillor Bamford's question, because it seems all very vague. So from my simplistic mind, could you clarify, both of you, you and the gentleman over there, once people are living in these bungalows or whatever is being built, will the roads be adopted by that time? Yes or no? Because that is quite fundamental to this. Because I know Councillor Bamford did say Maidenhill was adopted, but I get complaints all the time from people at Maidenhill still. And of course there's Poolnoon Street. And this is something we really need a clear answer about. Is it yes or is it no?
I certainly can't give a yes or no answer to that, because, as I've explained, there's a legislative process that a developer has to go through to get the roads adopted. So they apply for a road construction consent. That's considered by the Roads Department, and then it would be, say, approved or amended. And then once the road is constructed, it's inspected by the Roads Department, and then it's adopted.
I know this, but this is I think this is 5 phases to this. So is the application going to be made at phase 1, which will be several years before completion anyway, which should allow it to be completed on time? Sorry, are you listening to what I'm saying? I'm talking to the staff, the officials. Okay, but my question to clarify is, it starts there are 5 phases, I think, or 6 phases, certainly 5 phases. Is the application going to be made at the start at phase 1, which would give it adequate time to be completed by phase 5? That's the point, because people are not going to be living in it till phase 5, presumably.
Hold on just a minute.
Sure, finished.
In terms of programme, the roads construction consent would be applied for immediately after planning permission was granted, as would be in normal developments. In terms of the construction of the roads, the intention is to build the roundabout and the loop road during phase 1. At that point, we have an adoptable road which meets council requirements as set out in condition 2. Thereafter, the development, as you see, we talked about pod 1 or zone 1, zone 2, the developments will come off that because our spine road will already have been built. So take the example, as we left the site, the final phase is that area of land on the right-hand side. To access that site, you come off the main road and into that development area, and the houses would be built then. At that point, the houses within that area would be subject to a further road construction consent and then would be adopted by the authority at that point in time. The council can only adopt the roads, as has been stated today, once the roads are built. It can't be done in advance. But because we've got an existing road, we only need to upgrade that road. We don't need to build a brand new road, but we do need to build the roundabout into the access, at the access point to come into the site. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. It became really apparent that this is quite far out in the bus journey there and back today, so it was a couple of questions about that and then a question to planners about this. It's probably just going over old ground a little bit from what's been said, but as this is quite far out, will we be, and I know I am repeating it, will we be responsible for gritting this road? Because this is quite a substantial addition to the winter gritting route. And we know how difficult it is to get any routes put onto the winter gritting route. So this is a long journey out to do one bit, and back. Will that be added? And also, if there's any more information about, I'm very, very concerned about the sustainability of it, because we spoke the last time about the bus that would be put on, that this would only be up to a certain point in the phasing, and then the expectation would be that it would be taken over by the residents to pay for and fund. So where is this, how long is this bus to be paid for now by the developers? How often will it run? How many people is this going to take back and forward? How long will you run it for? And is there any guarantees that this will be put on after that? Because this is really, really far away from anything else. My last question to the planners was, and I think you may refer back to the enabling works with this, but I need to ask it. We previously approved an application for the Drumby Care Home. I know there's another one in. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the one previously. And a lot of that report of handling was given over to talk about the objection from the HSCP, and a lot of weight was given to that. And I think the sort of summing up was that it was contrary to strategic policies 1 and 2, as applicant has not demonstrated that the proposal will not have an adverse impact on existing community facilities. But everything that came before that were the same objections we got from HSCP here. So I suppose my question is, why were we accepting that it was contrary to strategic policies 1 and 2 for that one, but we're not accepting that in this case? Because as far as I can see, HSCP have the same concerns in every case. They definitely did for Greenbank just the other week, which we refused. So why is it not given the same weight here? Thank you. That was my 3.
Thank you, Chair. I can come in terms of the approach we've taken. I think I did allude to it previously. In this case, it reflects the requirements of the legislation for us to pay special attention to the desirability of preserving the Category A listed building. And we have considered the proposal against a number of considerations and the widest possible policy context. And we do acknowledge that there are impacts from the proposal, significant impacts in relation to, as we've spoken about earlier today, environmental impacts, loss of trees, traffic generation we're discussing, and also policy SG3, and the comments of our Health and Social Care Partnership have been taken into consideration. The on-cost is not a material consideration, but the concern that they have in relation to over-provision is, however, that's been weighed up against the wider health, economic and substantial cultural benefits that the Planning Authority sees emerging from this proposal. And it's really because of that, when you're quite correct, Drumby Crescent, a separate planning application, different set of circumstances as recently considered application as well. So it's just looking from a Planning Authority's perspective, it's looking at that wider policy context. And that's where we've landed in this particular instance. I hope that helps, Councillor.
Mr Soto, do you want to comment about regarding the transport, the bus? Yes. Please.
There will be a dedicated bus service, and that's part of the Green Travel Plan proposals. The developer is willing to provide a subsidy for that. That subsidy will be until the end of phase 3. By that time, we're hoping there's a critical mass with the care home having been built, that the demand for the service will such that there will be a feasible bus service, and the proposal in our transport assessment showed a bus route going down to Barrhead and back, and the service, the frequency was based on 4 times a day. I'd just like to point out that the more subsidy that's put into the bus service, the greater the scale of enabling development. And we are hoping that after that period of time, we can all sit down with Scottish Passenger Transport, who wouldn't agree to investing in any bus service. So that's the proposal. We're expecting that at the end of phase 3, because there will need to be a factoring service within the development, that the residents in the care home will continue what the subsidy will be and maintain the bus service.
It was just a follow-up on that. So what is the subsidy, and how much are the residents expected to take on board going forward? Just even per annum? Or how much subsidy is the developer putting in?
The developer with no revenue income from the buses is putting in £80,000 per year.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to pick up on Councillor Ivelin's point, which I think is a very salient observation, and indeed a continuation of a point I made myself at the first planning meeting. Now, it does actually say in the report of handling on page 10 that Strathclyde Passenger Partnership for Transport recommended that if we were minded to grant, that we seek a condition that there is provision for a continued operation of the bus service. So it sounds like we're going to get up to a certain phasing of the development, and if there's inadequate demand, for example, within the development itself, potentially be no public transport option, which puts us in quite a difficult position because we have to approve this based on planning guidance, which includes LDP2, and policy D8 of LDP2 says that we have to be sure that there will be sustainable transportation options. How can we make that decision if it's only guaranteed up to a certain point of the development? Thank you, Chair.
Well, it is a question, it isn't. There was a question asked at the last meeting about GP coverage, and it was mentioned that there's a GP in Uplamore. I hope the HSCP would be here, but they don't appear to be. Oh, can you clarify if there is a GP in Uplamore, or is there a GP that would cover Uplamore, given that, as far as I'm aware, the nearest GP is in Neilston and they're very stretched. So I understand that the first phase of young people, aged 55 and over, I'm saying young people, but obviously as the care home and the other development goes on, there may be people who are in more need of support and more need of a GP. Can you clarify what the situation, the GP situation is? Because I understand, the infrastructure to the people of Uplamore in this respect is quite restricted, and I wouldn't want them to be detrimentally affected by having to overstretch not just the health visitors and the HSCP, but actually the GP service provision.
I can actually only confirm from my own knowledge that the GP is based in Neilston. I would have to get further information for you in respect of Uplamore. I don't have that information at hand. I'm sorry.
When you say you need more information, can you confirm that there is no GP in Uplamore?
I'm not at this point in time able to confirm that. I don't have that information at hand. I do know the only one I'm aware of from my own knowledge in respect to this application is the GP in Neilston.
There isn't a GP in Uplamore.
Right, could you put off your
Thank you.
mic now? Thanks. Okay.
My understanding is when there's a care home being built or opening, they have to have medical general practice, what's the word for it, cover for the residents. So, I mean, whoever is going to be opening that care home is going to have a GP who's prepared to cover it from somewhere.
I thought that that there needs to be a GP on site, more or less. I don't know whether that is right. It's not a consideration for us, so we're just pointing that out, okay? Somebody want to move some way to the vote? Is there anybody in? Yeah.
I'd like to move that we refuse planning permission.
Do you have a seconder?
I'll second that.
There's a lot of hands up to second that. Okay. Is there anybody otherwise minded?
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. If we could maybe, if Councillor Ireland is moving refusal, could she state the reasons?
I was just going to come to that.
Apologies.
Sorry, Ian. Could you give me your reasons for refusal, please?
Yes, thank you very much. It's against what I think is against Scottish planning policy, with specific reference to woodland. Scottish planning policy states that ancient semi-natural woodland is an irreplaceable resource, and along with other woodlands, hedgerows and individual trees should be protected from adverse impacts resulting from development. And I think that this would have a quite severe adverse impact on the ancient woodland. I won't go back over the objections that have came in from the Woodlands Trust and the Scottish Forestry, because they were quite strong. Also, it's significantly contrary to our own local development plan too. D3, Greenbelt and countryside around towns. The proposal does not comply with policy D3 due to the scale of the enabling development in the Greenbelt and associated visual impact associated with introducing an urban scale development in a Greenbelt location. Policy D7, natural environment features. We as a council should be seeking to protect and enhance natural environment features and seek to increase the quantity and quality of the area's biodiversity. We should have a strong presumption against development on or adjacent to natural features. There would be an effect from this development. Policy D8, sustainable transport network, as we just touched on with the bus and where it is, and that became very clear on the site visit. how far out it is. So there is a reliance on private car travel that would be here. It's considered the proposal does not comply with Policy D8, Strategic Development Plan, Strategic Policy 1, overall in terms of sustainability of the proposal and reducing the need to travel. It's clear the proposal cannot be considered as a retirement settlement that will cater for the majority of residents' needs. So I feel it's against Strategic Policy 1 of the Strategic Development Plan. And as I touched on in my question, I feel that because it's also contrary to Strategic Policy 1 and 2, as it cannot be demonstrated that the proposal will not have an adverse impact on existing community facilities, particularly in Upland Moor, and especially as Councillor Bamford just touched on with her question. I think that's it. Thank you.
I will formally second it. I think for everything that Councillor Ireland has said, from my perspective as convener of Health and Social Work, I have real concerns about this development. I know I raised that at the previous meeting, especially around GP provision, and I don't believe it's sustainable in the long term to rely on people paying for their beds in the care home. We know in the past in East Renfrewshire care homes have failed, and this has led to local authorities having to come in and take over the provision of care. So that is the reason why I will be formally objecting to this application.
You just leave it.
So everybody can hear you.
MD otherwise minded about refusal? Is MD otherwise minded to go? Nothing? Okay, thank you. That's fine.
I'll just confirm the decision of the committee then is to refuse planning permission for the reasons outlined by Councillor Ireland and Councillor Craignan. Thank you.
Right, listed building approval. Is there MD want to speak on that? No. There's two separate items, but 1 and 2. Right, so one for the development of the houses. This is for the listed building, for building consent, for planning permission for it. MD anything to say? Nobody? Okay. I
would like to move to reject, Chair, for the reasons as stipulated against the first application. Yes, absolutely. I mean, looking at the there's numerous transportation. It's not economically or socially sustainable. Yeah.
Members, just in relation to the listed building application, just to clarify for the minutes, the proposal is the restoration, alteration and conversion of Caldwell House, involving the removal of existing render, repointing and repairs to stonework, new roof, new windows, new lime render to all facades, new repaired chimney stacks, selective demolitions and internal fit-out with modern construction techniques, plus restoration of the former keeper's house, involving repairs to stonework, new roof, new windows, new lime render to all facades, new chimney pots and internal fit-out with modern construction techniques. So this listed building application complements the application 2021-0298, which was recommended for refusal, and deals specifically with the works to the listed building and to enable the restoration and repair of the listed buildings, and determination would be would be taken on that basis.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say on page 3 of the Councillor's papers, the description, which is against the second application, is not what Mrs Nicholl just read out there. It is actually a duplicate of the description of the first application. Don't know if others have seen that. I think there's a printing error there.
Yeah, no, you're right. It is a repetition. It's just an error. So the description that Julie read out is the correct one, and that is in all our documentation, that is the description of the listed building application. It's just in the index sheet, as we call it at the start, that the description is the same as the planning one. Hope that helps.
Otherwise minded.
Could I just ask for a clarification, please? If the first application has been refused, how on earth could you even accept the second one? I don't understand how it stands alone. You understand that, but how does it stand alone without enabling finance? Is anyone able to explain that?
Excuse me, sorry. Listed building consent and planning consent are different, so sometimes you can require listed building consent for something and you don't require planning permission. And in this case, you're right, that in all likelihood, obviously the listed building works are not going to take place if there's no enabling works. Also, the works within the Caldwell House itself that are development. So, I think in this case, I think you would be looking. I think I would advise you would need to refuse the listed building consent as well, rather than approving it. That's probably.
Then that's what's actually happening.
Yeah, because it.
Would you leave that alone?
Can I just I'll just confirm the decision. Sorry, Chair, your microphone wasn't on, so members of the public can't hear the decision. So it's just to confirm that it was to refuse listed building consent due to being contrary to the policies that were listed by Councillor Ireland and Pragnell previously. Thank you.
This on this agenda, so we'll thankfully close the meeting. Okay, thank you.